Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Dancing.
Remember that thing we did?
The clouds.
Let's move the clouds.
I love moving the clouds.
Yeah, maybe that's the one for right now.
Yeah. Wow.
It's wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off. Let's just continue doing it while we introduce ourselves. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving, where we are playing with clouds. Today we're going to be talking about... This is fitting. Past wastes of time. Things we used to think were a waste of time.
That's hilarious. I would have thought this was a complete waste of time.
You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving. And you can learn more about us and how to practice with us live and move your own clouds on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we are going to do this self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
So if you think we sound a little bit funny, it's because we do. And it's because we started doing this body practice before we started recording the podcast. And it sort of just zens you out, don't you think?
It does.
Do you notice that?
Yes.
It makes it almost tough to think at the same time, which I think for a lot of us would be a nice reprieve to just not think for a moment. Mm-hmm. So if you want to join us, it started off with, how do you describe this? Because clouds would be up high. We're sort of doing it in front of us. We're
wax
just moving,
on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off, right? If you're from that era of the Karate Kid, and if you're not, how would you describe what we're doing?
Like you're cleaning a window slowly.
Yes. And if it feels better to imagine, when I think about cleaning a window, all of a sudden I feel like I got to press hard. Ooh. But there's a softness to how the energy in my hands right now that feels really nice. But that's
if you were giving Reiki to a window. Cleaning a window with Reiki.
Cleaning a window with Reiki. That is what it is. That's exactly what it is. And then if you were to move it up high, you might be moving clouds around. So you can let it evolve into whatever feels good. We're giving Reiki to a window. Okay, that is what it is. So this feels very calming right now.
Yeah.
And what I notice is it shifts the pace of my breathing. And it shifts the pace of my talking to something that feels more pleasant to me now. But I would say in the past, I would have thought this feels awkward and weird.
Perhaps right? A waste of time.
Perhaps a waste of time. And thoughts just don't come. It's quite nice.
That's great. Well, this reminds me of Tai Chi.
It does.
In fact, I'm doing some Tai Chi.
Yes, and I notice my hands moving in some Tai Chi movements as well.
Right? And that's the whole thing with Tai Chi is that you're moving and flowing with this ball of energy in front of you. Not the whole thing, but one of the things with Tai Chi, the thing I like about Tai Chi is you're working with this energetic space and moving it around not even moving almost feels like too big of a word. You're encouraging it with your own energy to move as it wants to in line with your body.
Yeah. Move as it wants to feels right for me. It reminds me of, of course, Qigong and Tai Chi have similarities. And a phrase that I've heard used before to describe them or describe Qigong is effortless effort. So like there is some effort in that you're doing something, but it feels quite effortless in that like my hands are just doing their own thing. And it feels quite pleasant to let them do their own thing.
Yeah.
So definitely would have gone under like labeled, stamped waste of time in the past.
Waste of time. Yeah. Hurry through the Tai Chi to get to the end. My friend Ty, our friend Ty, who used to teach us Tai Chi, I remember him saying, so I'm trying to move as slowly as humanly possible, right? And he showed me his slow Tai Chi, and he's really good at it. But he used to practice with this group of little old Chinese ladies who would laugh at him and be like, "What's your hurry?" Like, he's hurrying like a snail. It felt great for the job to be to slow down as much as possible.
So are you meaning that they felt that Ty, even though Ty was trying to go slowly, they thought that he was still going really fast?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I really like this because it's all relative. It's all relative to what our sort of set point and our autopilot is at. But if you look at the essence is, can we allow ourselves to grow a pathway that's different than our usual habitual autopilot response? Yeah. And my slow talking that I found really helpful to practice and really awkward and strange in the beginning is maybe not that slow to some people. But what it opened up for me, because now I have new options, is one. Now I shifted my belief system of everything has to be fast or else it's a waste of time. The way my body gets to feel now, learning not just a new pace, but finding comfort within a new pace is amazing. But I don't have to compare my pace to someone else's. I can just look at, it would have been much faster had I not been practicing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I used to want things to go fast because if things slowed down, my anxiety would catch up with me. There'd be room to feel notice
when you're slow.
Yeah.
Right? Or there's more receptors, I think, available to feel when we're slow, right? Which I didn't want to feel nothing. So I was fast in all the things.
First thing that you feel when you want things to be faster, the first thing you feel is impatience, which has such a vibe. Right? It's such a physical experience for me of having impatience. And it's like we talk about, once you embrace your feeling and you go from feeling all constricted and like there's nowhere to go to feeling like you have spaciousness and a launching off pad, it's like that. To slow down within impatience is a very spacious experience and very comforting.
And it's a skill to grow, right? Yeah. It makes me think of this morning, actually, I have an example of the waste of time experiences. So this morning, I had envisioned that I would go to the gym because I had this block of time that was free before we were coming on to record. And then there were some things that pulled at me to sort of get taken care of and get done on the computer. And I could feel my body with that impatient feeling of like, just hurry up and get this done so you can go do the thing you really want to do, the thing you planned on doing. And then I realized, and I only realized because I've grown that muscle to notice and to pause. I was like, that's not a pleasant way to be in this moment, to be like doing this thing. And it's not like it's a horrible thing to be doing, but like just rushing, like wanting it to be over so I could do the other thing. And then what I said to myself was, this is important too. Like this matters too. this will set up, like, this is a nice thing to do for my future self. What I was doing on the computer that I didn't need to get done, but there was a little flow there already. I was in it. And I had not planned to be in it. It just sort of grasped me and like, here we go. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll just finish this quickly in 2 minutes and then I'll head off to the gym. And then like the time remaining to go to the gym kept getting shorter and shorter. I was like, what if I just let that plan go for this morning and just really sit and feel into the importance of what I'm doing now and how it's going to set up my life to feel better for myself down the road by taking the time to do this. And all of a sudden it just felt better. All of a sudden I could enjoy the time doing this task that I hadn't planned on doing. I just sort of fell into it and ended up getting some momentum. And in the past, I would have thought, oh, this is a waste of time. It's a waste of time because I'm not doing the thing that I had planned to do. I'm not doing the thing I wanted to do. And it's something that traditionally, for me, historically, I have placed zero value on, which is foundational aspects of my life. So I used to deem all that as a waste of time. If you could just be in crisis mode and get everything done, what's the point of creating systems and foundational things that make life easier? And it's taken me a long time to shift out of resistance to that, to the idea of there can be things that I can set up in my life so that life feels more spacious and peaceful and orderly. But I had so much experience in childhood and in my youth and my younger years operating on like chaos and urgency.
Yeah.
And I functioned so well in that state that like I have not spent the time putting things in place and creating new habits that allow for more system and structure and order and flow. So this morning I was like, oh, this is important too. So that was a neat coupling to make with the task of this is important too. It has its place in my life. It hasn't in the past, and it's beginning to now. Let's not rush through this and be super annoyed because it's keeping me from this other plan I had.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of my rushing experiences are rushing to either, there's two for me. One that I find sort of pleasant, which is rushing to accomplish a thing that I desire to be accomplished, or rushing through a thing I don't want to be doing because I want to be relaxing and having a nice time. So I'm not inclined to slow my rush for the accomplishment thing.
Okay.
And that feels good to me. And when it's rushing through something to get to that relaxation place, I know that I want to notice that rushing feeling in my body. I want to slow down and I want to bring in some of that feeling into this moment. Like there doesn't need to only be relaxation and good feelings after the job is done. I can bring some of that in and slow down in the moment, and that will feel better for me.
It reminds me of like, and I've done this before, and I know other people have been in this position of rushing to your massage or rushing to your yoga class. And I'm like, really, what is the point of this? Isn't the point to like be able to feel more spacious?
Right.
And yet I'm like working myself into like crazy knots here.
Sometimes I'll notice myself rushing through a meditation. And what's funny when that happens, or rushing through breath work, it slows down when you're trying to rush it. And if I actually surrender to the moment, 15 minutes or whatever of meditation or breath work goes by in an instant. But the minute I'm feeling frustrated about it, it takes 50 times longer.
Yeah. I've done meditations and like I've had to really find meditate. I don't even like that word. It says something in my body. Like just those guided practices feels better for me. I've had moments where I'm like, is it over yet? How many more minutes? I know it's supposed to be 10. Like, are we at 5? Are we at 7? Are we at 3? And like sometimes like it's 10 minutes long. I know it's 10 minutes. I'm like, there's still 7 minutes left.
What the hell? Who did this?
Stuff to do.
Yeah.
But it's just good to notice what kind of relationship we're in with different tasks, how we move through different tasks. It shows us a lot about our patterns.
Yeah. And why we're doing what we're doing, right? If I'm sitting down to meditate, probably it's at least partly to slow down. And sometimes I have to remember that and then do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So wastes of time. What we used to think was a waste of time. I think we both have a little list. Do you want to, anything jumping out at you want to share?
Oh, what we used to think was a waste of time. Definitely play and rest. That jumps out for sure. I can definitely expand on that, but I'm just seeing if other things come. Play and rest. I think dreaming big was put in the waste of time, energy, tied to sort of waste of time pile.
Yeah, say more about those.
Play was always, I think, and I never felt like an encouraged thing or something of value growing up. And what was valued growing up was academics and accomplishing things, getting things done. I think play I also associate with like laughter and giggles and silliness. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I had this feeling of there was no room for that. It was be serious. And like laughter makes noise. And sometimes adults don't like noise or they deem children playing as noise. And so something was programmed in me that like play wasn't that important. Yeah. And so definitely play, art. Art was, I don't know if I had mixed messages about art. I watched a lot of interactions between my parents that I think informed, that I took messages from, that basically were saying art is a waste of time and not a hobby that's productive and constructive.
Right.
And then I think mixed in with messages of like, you need to be able to do things well. I was like, well, you got to be a good artist. And I'm not. So that's a waste of time.
Right.
I think anything I thought I couldn't be good at was deemed a waste of time.
Right. Yeah. I've got a lot of that same programming. One of the first things my mom will say when something, a new undertaking, that's not designed to make money, say doing art. Yeah. One of the first questions will be, oh, how can you make money doing that? Mm-hmm. And there's so many things that by making money with them, they are ruined. And that's not the point. Making art is not about money. It's a psychological and emotional exploration and catharsis, like there's so much value in there for so many reasons, for letting your mind wander in creative spaces and all that produces for you in so many ways. Yeah. And as a psychological tool, it's very solid.
Yes. Right. Walking, I thought was a waste of time because I'm like, if you're not hiking, what's the point of walking? Like there's a theme. It has to be like the highest intensity version of something or else what's the point?
Yeah.
Going to the gym, like sometimes I go to the gym now for 15 minutes. I have a good solid 15-minute workout time. And I'll still go and I'll see that as valuable and it will feel good in my body those 15 minutes that I'm there. But in the past, I would have thought, well, if it's not an hour and a half, then what's the point? It's a waste of time. Yeah. So definitely the intensity, if it was low intensity, it was considered a waste of time. If it was like short in terms of the time I could do it, I would feel like it was a waste of time.
Yeah. There's something that's been coming up for me a lot this week that ties into this that I'll bring up, and it's about excellence and striving and being the best. And how, don't bother unless you're the best. I went to this Day of the Dead celebration, and there was mariachi singers, and one of the things I love about Mexico and Mexican culture is this musical celebratory, like everyone's just singing and musical and dancing together, and it's what happens, right? And then I thought about North American culture, and I'm speaking super generally here, obviously, but there is this kind of vibe up north that's like, if you're not the best, don't do it, or you're doing it in order to become the best. And I thought, God, if every Mexican didn't sing or play guitar unless they were the best, what? Like, what a nightmare. And I think it's really insidious that we strive for this bestness, because then what happens to everyone that isn't the best? How do we interact? How do we celebrate? How do we share of ourselves in these ways, Yeah, I think so much of doing is just for the sake of doing, not for besting.
Yeah, that is that seems very logical and reasonable and makes sense to hear you say that now. It was definitely not my frame of mind before. And like, have a current example of this. One of my kids is trying a new sport, and he hasn't played it very much before. And all of a sudden decided, I think I want to try out for the team. I'm like, interesting. Okay, that's great. Like, I was super excited. I think anytime someone is willing to try something new, I feel like a deep sense of excitement and a sense of pride and a sense of like, just happiness that this person is obviously not shackled down by old beliefs that I used to carry, right? And there's like, I think 12 spots on this team, and who knows how many kids will try out. And my kid said, he's like, I don't know if I'll make it, but I'll try anyways. And like, I have a kid who is like really into sports and generally makes the team. And this is a kid who isn't as competitive, but like, I think what's cool about him is he'll do things for the sake of doing them. And he's like, I don't know if I'm going to make the team, but I'll try anyways. And I thought that was so cool. Like, and what happened next in the conversation makes it even better, I think. I said, so do you think you're going to try your best at the tryout? He's like, yeah, of course I would. Why wouldn't I? And it was just this neat thing for me to put all those things together of, you're going to try your best, even though you might not make it. And if you don't make it, it's still worth trying. And I know that, especially as a parent, those are the things we would say to our children. But like, that did not course through me as the truth as a child. And I carried that with me into adulthood in its own kind of ways, right? I think as a child, or even as an adult, if I tried out for something, or there was a time where this is where my head would have gone, well, maybe I'll try, even if I don't think I'll make it. I didn't do much of that before. I would only try things I knew I pretty much would be able to succeed in. Yeah. But let's just say I did. Then the next brain belief was, well, maybe don't try too hard, or at least don't tell people you try your hardest. Because if you don't make it, at least you could always fall back on, well, I didn't really try. I didn't really want it anyways. But I thought it was so cool that he's like, I have no idea if I'll make it. I'll try anyways. And lots of kids have played this for much longer than me. Oh, well. And I'll still try my best. Mm-hmm. And if I don't make this team, there's other places I can play next fall when you can sign up to like practice the skills. I can do that. I'm like, oh, look at you, all so nice and emotionally mature and confident.
Yeah. Man, you're directly related to that, and that's real nice. Good job.
Yeah, I try. So yeah, I think that's pretty neat because I definitely didn't grow up that way. If I think about, yeah, I guess I thought it was a waste of time to try for things I didn't have certainty or almost certainty that I would succeed in.
Yeah.
Whether it was getting a job or like starting a project or applying to a certain school. And I have like a lot of examples of that.
Yeah. So isn't that interesting? So you're saying that sort of effort was not a waste of time, and that was paired with an inner dialogue that was something like, oh, you might not do great though, so don't try too hard or think too much on if you might do good.
It was just a mental mess.
Yeah. Those were the real wastes of time. All that thinking and negative thinking.
All that thinking. Okay, so I want to say something else here, that I always find it neat to have conversations with people because you get a sense of how they're wired, and like what makes sense to me might totally not make sense to someone else and vice versa, or like it wouldn't have been how I thought about it, but I find it refreshing to be like, oh, like never thought about it that way. So I'll use this example with one of my kids. So I've been flying a lot, and I'll send my kids in this group chat like my flight number, right? But I never really just explain it. But basically, I don't know if you know this, if you send someone in a text your flight number, and if they press on it, it'll show you the status of the flight. But I knew that, but I don't think they knew that, and I never thought to explain it. Anyways, I just arrived back from a trip, and I asked my kid, I said, hey, like, do you know that you can press that thing and it'll show you the status of the flight? Because their dad also just went somewhere, and we were wondering, like, did he land? Did he not? Like, we didn't have his flight number. And so we started talking about this, and he's like, oh no, I don't look. I'm like, oh, okay. And then like, I'm like half joking here, and I'm like, so you don't care whether I'm dead or alive, if I made it there or not? And he's like, yeah, I care. But I'm just going to assume you made it and you're okay. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, does that feel better for you? He's like, yes, it feels better for me to assume that you're alive. And it was just very matter of fact and very truthful for him. And I was like, yeah, I could imagine that it feels better to assume that I'm alive. And I laughed, and I laugh internally also because I know that I was never wired that way. And still, like, I practice to not fall into worry mindset.
Yeah.
Right? Like recently, like there'll be different situations, and I'll think, oh, I didn't hear from a loved one. Like, are they okay? Did they die on the side of the road or something? And I don't sit with those thoughts for long. But sometimes they cross my mind. And I've had to train myself, practice. Like, and these are people who, like, it's far away, can't really do anything about it. Like, if they were dead right now on the side of the road, there is nothing I could actually do to change that.
Yeah.
Right? If they needed help right now, I am actually not the best person to be able to help them. And I will find out soon enough what's going on. But that was not like, and like I really try to talk myself through that and like help soothe myself and remind myself that if, we're talking about waste of time, like that is a waste of time.
Right.
Right? What might be more useful of my time is just to acknowledge I really care about this person. I hope they're well. Right? It scares me to know that people I care about could be taken away.
Yeah.
And just to be with that fear, be with that love and care for people, be with that fear that I feel, and soothe myself in that moment, and then shift my focus. Yeah. If there's nothing else I can do about it. But I thought it was neat to hear my kids say, yeah, that's a better feeling thought. It's a better feeling assumption to assume you're alive and well.
And I want to impress upon those listening and watching that this is an option, right? It's so easy to just fall into, oh, well, I worry. Like, of course I worry. I love them. All these things. I used to know someone who said that worrying was a waste of time. And her sister would say, no, it's not. The things you worry about never happen. So it's a good use of time. I would suggest that it is not a good use of time. And that there is an option. You don't just have to default to worry. Just because you've always worried and you feel inclined to worry, this is a simple and relatable expression of anxiety, which is a feeling that we can learn to be with. And you can transform with some simple work the act of worrying into something else. And you can actually feel less worried and more better.
And more better. Like, what we're saying, we're not saying like dismiss your worries and you're wrong for worrying and you're wasting your life away, or let's go into avoidance and pretend we're not worried and we don't feel these things. We're saying like you have a choice in what you do with that worry. Where's the next place of focus for your energy? And it's either going to help bring some regulation to your system, or it's going to activate you more. It's either going to allow you to shift into a nervous system state that allows you to have more clarity and take some action in the areas that you can change something in, or it's going to work us up so much that we can't think straight and we can't really execute on anything that we could maybe change.
Right.
So, there's a related piece to this, again, of like how someone else thinks. And I would ask my partner, I would ask him, I just have a curious mind. So I ask a lot of what ifs, right? Or do you ever think about such and such? And it's very funny to hear our brain patterns, because my do you ever think about whatever is generally more geared towards some disastrous thing. Do you ever worry about whatever? And he has a response that feels like a standard response to me now. And it makes me laugh and helps me calm when I hear it or say it to myself he's like, but why? But why would I do that to myself? He's like, yeah, I could spend time thinking that or worrying about that. But why? And so he just says those two words, but why? And like not in a shaming way or like what's wrong with you kind of way, but just in this, it's sort of like my kid, like, why would I want to do that to myself? Why would I voluntarily think something repeatedly that I can't do anything about that's going to make me feel worse?
Yeah. This really highlights the optional nature of it, right? It is not a rule that we must worry and have these awful feelings. Lots of people just don't have that experience.
It blows my mind.
Yeah.
I never thought it was optional.
Yeah.
And I always just thought like, okay, even if I thought it was optional, or I think I would have just deemed myself, well, I'm just not like that. Right. I'm just not like you. And that means that by nature, I'm just wired and designed to have a worry brain, and I'm always going to worry. And what I realize now is I'm like, no, I can shift that.
Yeah.
That actually shifts. It has shifted. I'm still shifting. But I don't have to default to, well, my brain is not wired like yours to not add worry and not grow worry. So forever, I'm just going to be laden with all these worries that cross my mind and sit in my mind forever.
No. Your political beliefs will change, your style will change, your tastes will change. Your method of worrying or not worrying is also optional for changing.
Mm-hmm. So life feels better now when I ask myself, I catch myself. I'm like, but why? but why think this thought right now?
That's great. It's a good redirect tool as well, to have a phrase you can glom onto that comes up naturally to reshift you.
And like what I notice is if I ask myself the but why a little bit and I get curious about it, it's just like any worry. Underneath any worry, it just shows you there's something that matters to me here.
Yeah.
And like if I can spend a little bit of time just connecting to what is it that matters to me? Like how about just owning that this matters to me a lot? I care a lot about this.
Yeah.
And like feel that even as I say that, to say I really care about this. Right? It matters to me how it unfolds. Yeah. I care about this person, right? I'd love to feel this thing working out the way I'd like. That would feel real. That would be really exciting for me. Imagine if we spoke from those places instead of I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, and that's worrying me and that's stressing me. And just to speak about what it is you really care about and what it is you desire.
Yeah. It's huge. It's the same thing with an utterly different vibe. Much more helpful.
And I find too, maybe it's also a little bit vulnerable, like to ourselves and to let other people see, like to claim, to really own with our words, I care about this. This matters to me. I desire this.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to lean into those places if we haven't grown our muscle to be with disappointment. Right? Yeah. And to learn to allow the unfolding of events. So when I think about it, it's almost easier, quote unquote, easier to just spit out worries. I think our society is sort of wired to be like, oh yeah, you're worried. Yeah, I'm worried. You're worried. We're all worried. we know how to live in that energy together, even though it's not that pleasant.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, this really matters to me. I really care about it.
Yeah.
And I recognize that there's only a small portion of this that's within my control and a big portion that's not. That feels a lot more vulnerable to admit to ourselves, to face, to say to other people, to like field from other people what they care about.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, there's a lot less to say when you're being vulnerable compared to when you're worrying. And I think that then is a double salve, right? You have this anxiety that you want to speak about. And there's the social anxiety of being with other people and not knowing what to say. So it gives you a topic to discuss, right? Immediately we've deepened into our worry, and it's like sort of solving a couple of problems, but feeling awful the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this reminds me of the importance of growing the skill to be able to feel connected to people and be in the same space as people without needing to speak. That would feel terrifying to me in the past, and also a waste of time. If you're together, why are you not talking?
Right. Yeah.
And I think growing that skill has changed so much for me, has shifted a lot, allowed a lot of things to shift, right? Like it allows vulnerability to be easier because like you said, well, now I only have one sentence to say. And now we're just going to be in each other's space and look at each other. Right. And now what? And if you don't talk to me, I'm going to assume you must be mad at me and you don't like me. Yeah. And if we're not doing something, I'm going to assume like, well, this was a waste of time. I should have hung out with someone else instead.
Right? Where we could do more and worry about things together. I used to think vulnerability was a waste of time. I'm like, stupid. You should instead be hard and defended and hardcore and badass.
Yeah. And vulnerability was a waste of time because like what would it prevent you from being able to do?
So in retrospect, nothing. It would have enhanced my life in many, many ways. But
at the time, what was the belief, you think?
Well, it was stupid. It would lead to pain and hurt. You know, people might this, that, or the other thing. Expectations of me. It all comes down to looking stupid, feeling stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Meanwhile,
hearing you say
it's
that, oh,
like the most engaging thing. Something I think about pretty often is people performing at open mics. So the person who wants to do really well and feels like they must do really well versus the person who's just full of music and they are bursting with it. And it doesn't matter what they sound like. They couldn't care less. They're just in it. They're doing it. Like, that is the vibe, enthusiasm and liveliness. What a gift and what a joy. Also things I used to think were stupid. Who wants to care about anything? That's stupid. Like, actually now I think that caring is the most important thing.
Caring and energy. You're speaking of energy, right? You're basically saying like it's the energy that you feel from someone that matters. Like, you don't really care about the content, like assuming it's not like inappropriate or harmful. Like, someone's ability isn't the only measure of, how something impacts you, whether you're touched by something.
Yeah.
And I think I had to learn that over time too. Being someone who grew up believing I needed to accomplish and be good at things, I think this isn't necessarily, I thought it was a waste of time. It was something I undervalued that luckily, other people showed me and reflected back to me over time. They're like, but I feel so good when I'm around you. You bring a certain kind of energy that's like different from how I feel with other people or in other spaces, right? You even hear that now, I'm a facilitator. There's lots of people who facilitate groups, but people will be like, no, there's something about how I feel when I'm in your space, whether it's like over Zoom or in person. And I think I always discounted that as a thing. I was like, well, I need to know the most. I need to be able to have all this knowledge. And it's my knowledge that people are finding helpful and supportive. And I'm seeing now, like, yes, that's part of it. But a much bigger part is how someone feels in my presence and how their nervous system feels in my presence. Recently, I think I posted on an IG story, reposted something I saw, was what if we measured success by how safe someone feels around us? And someone I know, a lovely person, sent me a message and said, well, then, I think she said something, well, then you're super successful. And I was like, oh, that's a very sweet thing to get to hear, that people feel that in my presence. So, yeah, learning to value that for what it is instead of discounting it.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm going to consult my list here. You already talked about rest. I've got sleep on my list. Oh, I used to think that sitting and staring was a waste of time.
Oh.
And there are certainly instances in which that might be the case. But I get a huge amount of creative space and downloads from spirit when I'm sitting and staring. It's also very regulating. And none of that is a waste of time. I build that quite importantly into my week now. And hard to argue with that. Like, my mother came at me and said, well, that's a waste of time. I'd explain, but she wouldn't believe me. And that's okay.
I think that's what matters most, is that you know that it's not a waste of time. You know what it adds to your life, right? Because there's going to be things, we don't all agree on what's a waste of time and what's not, but it's really about starting to explore and challenge the things that we deemed as a waste of time, right? Not for the purpose of, well, someone else says it's a good use of time, so I should assume that also, or I should believe that also. It's no, like, if I were to really give myself time to explore, like what could be in it for me in this thing that I used to deem as a waste of time. And like for me, for example, I talked about walking. Walking was a waste of time. And I think in another episode, I'd love to share about my journey towards building this habit into my life and all my resistance around it. But what I've noticed is like, I get that sparkle when I'm walking and I feel the fresh air and I can feel the pull to go outside, which I never felt before. Mm-hmm. And I think my walking outside has given me so much, like besides just the walking and how pleasant the walking is. But it's become time for me. It's where I reflect. It's where I practice my, different regulating skills. It's where I get delighted by things that I would have never noticed if I wasn't. It sort of just sets my mood up for so much more. So I come from a corporate background, and some of my clients, especially some of the men, are sort of wired more in that way of like, we talk about return on investment. What's the return on investment on this thing? And I realized like walking right now, the return on investment has been so high, way high. Like, so we're not even talking about, I used to think it was a waste of time. Now I see it's not. It's like beyond that. It's like, wow, the return on investment on this tiny little thing that I do, sometimes for only 5 minutes or just once around the block, has surprised me so much return on that investment of time.
Yeah.
And touch on like little things. Making my bed is something I thought was a waste. Totally. Like, gosh, that would have been at the top of the list of waste of time. And like my kid tells me this too. He's quite a logical, like thinking person. And my old thing was, I'm going to get back in it tonight anyways. What's the point? The point for me, and I'm not saying it has to be for everyone, but I notice that when it's made and I walk past it during the day, or I can like glimpse into that room when I'm like in the kitchen or something, the feeling in my body is, oh, that feels nice. Mm-hmm. That feels really nice. And then beyond that, this feels nice, I find it's an identity shifter.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm someone who takes care of my space, or I'm someone who values a space that feels good for me. And then it helps create other habits that match that identity. Whereas before, if I didn't make the bed or prioritize it, or thought it was a waste of time, it would sort of glommer into this other identity. Oh, I'm just a messy, lazy person.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just neat, right? For me, it's also the other day, this is something my ex-husband did all the time. And I thought it was a waste of time when he used to want to do this thing. And it was before you leave to go on a trip, like clean out the fridge, like the house would be clean, like all the things would be tidied and clean. And I thought, what a waste of time. Like, we're leaving. Like, why would we do all this? Right. And I don't know if he was able to articulate it well, or whether I was able to receive it at the time. But like, I started playing with that more recently in the last couple years. I'm like, oh, it feels so nice to come home to a place that's like orderly and taken care of. And you can just sort of pick up and continue on with life without having all these things in your way and the space all cluttered up. Yeah. And the other day I came home from a trip, and my goodness, Stephanie, the dishes, like the whole sink was clean. The sink that I wash dishes in, the sink that holds the dry dishes, it was just empty. And I can't explain to you the nice feeling in my body that this vessel was empty.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can this feel so good? It feels so good.
it's another launching off point, right? There's nothing for me to fix or clean or correct here. It's just ready to go. So it's not, you don't see a dirty sink full of dishes and it's like, well, that's the task. My life is now focused on a sink of dirty dishes. It's like, instead, every option is available. And that's a really nice feeling. I think this is an important one because it's easy to not make the bed and do the dishes, and it's easy to ignore all of that. And I think we do have like fundamental biological responses to mess because we're programmed that leads to illness and death and things like that. So there's a lot of subconscious stuff going on there as well. And the feeling of crawling into like new fresh sheets bed, it's undeniable. That is a pleasant feeling. And it's a very different feeling to crawl into a familiar nest that has been left in disarray for many days. It's a totally different energy to be in. And I think a really easy one to fall into that is also, relatively easy unless you're depressed, to correct these things in tiny ways that can make you feel better.
I'll do a little confessional here. We should do a confessional one day episode. Reminds me of women's group. But like, I have had times where I used to like work in my bed, like after the kids were in bed, or like one of the things I love to do is like take all my cookbooks. I love cookbooks, and like just sit in my bed and look at them and just be in a sea of cookbooks. And then the day will get away from me. I'll be busy and whatever, and I'll be so exhausted at the end of the night, and I'll just like push everything to the side. It's still on my bed, but like not the side I'm sleeping on, and just sleep, because the practical minded part of me is like, well, I have enough room. I don't sleep on that side of the bed. Who cares?
Yeah.
But like, I started paying attention. I'm like, there's a feeling. There's a feeling either during, after, or something that isn't quite the same, even though I never touched those things. Like, there's a feeling that's different. There's a feeling that's better, knowing the bed is my bed and it's not a storage place.
Yeah.
And I want to speak to this. I think it's important because I'm sure there's many research reasons and findings and whatever, but I'm a believer that in some part, for some of us, these things that we did or fell into doing or found ourselves in these habits of are a response to our trauma responses, right? And I grew up in an environment where it wasn't safe or emotionally comfortable to see everything. It wasn't safe or emotionally comfortable to hear everything. It wasn't safe or emotionally comfortable to feel everything. So you start shutting those sensory elements off and ignoring things. And that's why I think it became livable to live in a space that wasn't tidy or super orderly or whatever, because I wouldn't actually see it. And as, over the years, as I learned to, heal some of those things, I learned to tend to my nervous system. I learned to grow capacity in that nervous system. You see more, you feel more, you hear more, and you're like impacted by more of what you're experiencing. And so if you find yourself like living in a way that, I don't know, you're not super loving, you're not super proud of, maybe you're even embarrassed or ashamed about, or you compare yourselves to how other people keep their space, I just wanted to normalize that. And also share that it's possible to make a change. And you don't have to change everything all at once. You don't have to overwhelm yourself in that way. It's taken me years to get to some of these changes of like, oh, maybe it'd be nice to have a clean sink, or, maybe it'd be nice to have my bed made. And even sometimes, even though I know that now and intellectually my body feels it, it's still not a 100% ingrained habit. It's easy for me to slip out of that when something else pulls me in the morning.
Yeah.
And to not feel ashamed about that, not imagine or not believe that that means it can never change for you.
Totally. I almost think, I'm going to say it, presence is more important than habit in some kind of way. If it's a habit that you want to be doing and you're present to it and you're doing it, great. But presence in the moment, like I remember my dad saying once something about a turn indicator at night, and he's like, "Would you always use your turn indicator?" I'm like, "Well, if there's nobody around, then I wouldn't," you know? And my mom said, "That's terrible. You have to use your turn indicator." I'm like, "But who are you indicating to? I think it's better to be present in the moment. It actually indicates that I'm paying attention, which is the point, right?"
Yeah.
So I also remember a time my lovely friend Andrea told me that she'd brought a pizza to bed. And I was like, "Sorry, what? I can bring a pizza to bed?" I'm immediately bringing a pizza to bed. And like she spent all day in bed, just like farting around on her phone, watching things and eating pizza. I was like, "That's amazing. I had no idea that that was possible." And so noticing that there's some days where you, or some moments or whatever it is, that you want to have a nice, crisp, fresh bed and your dishes done. And sometimes you don't, and letting all of that be okay, and as best as you can, noticing what's true if you have the capacity for that, you know?
Yes. And like what you speak of is options. You have the option and none of them are shameable options. Yeah. Just choose what fits for the moment the best.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I used to think was a waste of time. Two things that are kind of related. One is being wrong, and one is listening to people who disagree with me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And not just listening to people who disagree with me, but listening with care and attention and like good faith, you know, not just assuming they're an idiot, actually paying attention, you know, being present with whatever that is. And being wrong, of course, used to just, I felt ashamed and stupid. And now it's a huge learning experience and is wonderfully valuable and humbling, which is also valuable.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Like, agree to all of those things. I've experienced it. I have a little nuance that I noticed in my life, a history of, like, I used to believe that there's only, I know that this is like, as I speak it out loud, I'm like, this is ridiculous. But that was the belief at the time, that there's only one right way to do things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that used to be so obvious. Yeah.
And so what I've really enjoyed, this is similar to, you know, like people that you don't agree with or whatever, but like a little bit different in that these are generally people I find enough commonality with who would be in my life. And like, you know, it's not like we're at polar opposite ends of the spectrum and I'm like, let me try to understand your perspective. I want to learn something. Like that's a different category for me. Also an important category, but this is a category of like, you're in my life. I love and care about you, respect you. And like the way you're doing that is just dumb. Like that used to be dumb, stupid, and a waste of time. And so this is like deeming other people's ways a waste of time.
Yeah.
And also probably deeming learning about their thought process a waste of time. Because why learn about that when it's obviously wrong, because only one way is right and it's my way.
Right. One of the things I love is when I've had a judgment and I'm like, oh, that person or way or whatever is stupid and wrong. And then I go in to correct it. And they're like, actually, this way like makes much more sense and is more effective for these reasons. And then I have to go, oh, you're right. Oops.
Oops. I want to say something about that. I'm just writing down something to come back to. Yeah, like I really enjoy it now. This is what I love too, is I'm noticing the things I used to deem as a waste of time. Not only am I opening to, perhaps it isn't a waste of time. There's actually many of these things that I'm like, oh, I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's neat too, to realize that there can be a shift. And I enjoy now hearing from other people how they do things.
Yeah.
And
I
like
used to feel
sometimes
defensive about that, I think.
Yes.
And now I perk up and I'm like, oh, is there a different way to do this? Please tell me.
Yes. Say more about, I used to feel defensive. Like, what was the belief system that you held on to that led to you feeling defensive?
Ridicule, like being ridiculed. So, if the question from somebody was, oh, why are you doing this that way? It would be like, oh, because it's the best way and I'm the best and everything else is stupid and terrible and please don't look at me. And now I'm like, oh, because that's the way I know. Is there a different way? What's your way? I'm curious and wonder if my way could be not better. It used to be, could it be better? But now could it be easier and feel nicer?
Like that. Let's say that again. Basically you're saying, could I shift? Is there a possibility for me to do something in a way that could be easier or feel better? And that somebody else's way might open me up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. This is somewhat related, and like I just think it's funny, like how I was wired before. Had this conversation also not that long ago, right? About when you meet new people, you're around new people, or you see your friends in like a different context than you normally would. Like for example, doing dishes. I think you find 10 people, you probably find 10 different ways of doing dishes, and like just observing how someone does dishes and looking at how I do dishes and like being like, hey, do you care how I do dishes? And they're like, no, I really don't care. It doesn't impact me. And like, I remember hearing, well, I don't understand why you do it that way, but I'm not bothered. Right? Whereas in the past, I couldn't get to that last piece of it doesn't impact me. So why do I care? Like, why do I have to feel like I have to impose my way? And why do I have to feel like I need to defend my way and convince you of my way? Right? Which was like from that old belief that like you're either wrong or you're right and you don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
Being wrong is bad. Yeah. All love is taken away when you're wrong.
Totally.
So
it's so ingrained. This is reminding me of a situation at my work like 15 or 20 years ago where I was doing dishes. And a woman who at the time I loved, but I found this irritating, this instance I'm about to report on. And in hindsight, she was actually the open, loving, and compassionate party, and I was not. So she was like, the way you're doing dishes is driving me crazy. I was like, oh, what's up? She's like, I don't want you to run the water. Like she was worried about water shortages and stuff and all of that. So I was like, well, thank you for letting me know. And I thought to myself, in future, when she's around, I will do dishes her way, but my way is right. And I will continue to do that in life generally. And then she left. And another woman who was there said, like, your way is right. She's wrong. And that was fortifying and lovely to hear, but also just a real statement about how we are these ways in society. There is a right way. There is a wrong way. There's no room for other people to be different and right, broadly and unconsciously speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This whole conversation just makes me think like, well, what do we value? Like what we value also influences or determines what feels like a right way to do something.
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
And often those are unrelated. Like what we value and how we want to feel might cause us to take a certain path of action. But this is why the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know, things might not turn out the way our values might dictate that we behave.
I think that one day it'd be really funny to like talk through how we do the dishes and like what the thought process is behind each choice. Like there's lots of, when I think about doing dishes, there's a lot of choice moments happening. Yeah. And some of those are like automatic and habitual, and some of those might be like thought out and intentional.
Yeah.
But I think it's a fascinating thing of being able to track what is intentional, what is habit, what is just I'm doing it because that's the way I was taught.
Yeah. What am I doing and why am I doing it? Because every point there where you're doing something with or without a reason is an opportunity for an observer or a loved one to either do something wrong or think you're doing something wrong. You know, there's every second is a choice point.
I just think of like these tests, if you want to call them that, you know, in like friendship or couples or roommates, where dishes, how do people do dishes? How do you build furniture?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are interesting things. And like, I think you get to know, this is the cool thing. They're either a source of like some major conflict and tension, or it's a really neat way to get to know someone and how their brain works.
Yeah. You know, there were a bunch of people here a month ago, and a lovely occasion when somebody else does my dishes. Love that. But all the stuff was in weird places. Like, I'm like, one of my thoughts was, are you nuts? Why have you put this in this section of the drying rack? Like, don't you know there's not supposed to be any opportunity for water to drip in this exact spot on the counter? Like, we really get super particular. And we make it mean a lot about other people.
Totally. And we could also make it mean someone cares about me enough to take that task off my list and do my dishes for me.
Nice.
And like, notice when our habitual pattern is not to lean towards that meaning, but like, what the heck is wrong with them that they couldn't see that this is obviously how you should put the dish in the rack? Like, I just realized recently, I don't put the dishes in the rack according to the little groove things that are there. And like watching someone else do that, and I was like, oh, that looks orderly, and I guess that's what those grooves are there.
Right? I actually find best and most correct to be pretty oppressive. Like, generally, if someone's like, this is the best and most proper way, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm just gonna move away from that on principle.
Like throughout this whole podcast and this dishwashing part, I have thought about something my dad taught me about doing dishes, and I'm like trying to hold it up to like, you know, certain things we're saying. I'm like, but is it the best? Like, okay, so he always taught me, and this is like for if you're washing dishes in a sink of water, which I don't think today is the time to get into the conversation about whether we're pro or like against that idea. But that was his way. And then it made sense. Like, he was like, wash the things that are least dirty first. Like, put the cleanest things in that water first. The least greasy things, wash those first. Because if you put in your greasiest things in that water, then all of a sudden you're washing all your other dishes with the most dirty and greasiest water. It makes no sense. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If that's what you value, right? You value conserving your water, not having to change it over and over, dumping more soap in. You value that your dishes are not greasy at the end of the day. That makes sense. But the reason why I'm sharing this is like, he's so adamant about this is the way. And like some of that poured into me, like, this is the way.
Yeah.
But
this is the way. Yeah. And so all of the things that we've come to believe are a waste of time were also poured into us, you know? And everything is optional. And I'm very excited for people to be able to explore. I wonder if there's things that I used to think were really important that I now think are a waste of time. I mean, I'm sure.
Yes, I think that's a separate episode because that's actually what I thought we were talking about today. So I had all these like things and I'm like, oh, we're not talking about that. We're talking about things
inverse.
Yes, the inverse is also an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So we'll have to pin that, I think. What's really neat here about this conversation about, like what we think is right or wrong or best or most efficient sometimes is through experience and sometimes is gathered and passed along from people, right? And what excites me about this is it highlights individuating, which individuating is to me about choice, about getting to choose what I carry forward with me, getting to choose what I leave behind, getting to choose what I want to start, how I want to start doing things or seeing things. And I think for a long time, in certain areas of my life, I probably didn't realize like I have more choice than I realize.
Yeah.
To choose whether I want to carry on those old beliefs and old ways of doing things, or whether it was time to like tweak them and change them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a question for you before maybe we wrap up. It's like a little bit of a generational question. And I'm wondering, because when I watch my kids, when it comes to like wondering whether their way is the best or if they made a mistake or whatever, there's this phrase I hear a lot with the kids. Oh, my bad. That was my bad.
Right.
And I think back, and I don't know if it was me, if I just wasn't in that kind of group, or if it just wasn't that kind of time. I feel like that phrase, or the essence of that phrase, was not a thing. It was like, for at all costs, don't admit you messed something up.
Right.
Or that was your fault. Is that how you experienced growing up?
So the phrase was there, but I think it was in it with a different vibe. It feels more like people are taking ownership now, whereas it used to feel more like a little bit of a deflective, like pretending you're taking ownership, but more just like, it's more like saying, don't look at me, look over there. My bad, gotta go. And now it's like, oh, my bad, let me rectify that.
Right. Yeah, and I just like it makes my insides excited to see this generation feel comfortable with that level of ownership and let me rectify it.
Yeah, it speaks to a generation that is shamed a lot less than previous generations.
If they only knew how lucky they were.
Right? People, I heard this, somebody said this morning, I was watching something. They're prepared to be with the moment. They're equipped to be with the moment. That's so huge, whatever the moment contains.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting what's happening with the younger kids these days. In some ways, I think their life is a lot harder. And in some ways, I think it must feel nice to not be shamed all the time.
Yeah, must be nice. Things we can all aspire to internally.
Yes. So we're learning how to be a kinder voice to ourselves.
We are. Yeah.
Are you going to make like sounds?
Oh. Is that what you were meaning? You probably meant that.
I thought it was like a duck sound or some weird sound. Like I just saw Stephanie like interlace her fingers or do something with her hands, and like it reminds me of like when you're kids and like you're making weird sounds with
blowing through a blade of grass.
Yeah.
No, I just was cold.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we do a closing practice?
No, I think that's good. happy exploring what you believe to be a waste of time. And also, I think why this episode is fun to do is it gives us an opportunity to see how we've evolved and see how we've grown and shifted, and to acknowledge that, right? And that took effort, that took intention, that took practice, that took curiosity and an open mind and a flexible way of being. And I'm valuing flexible way of being so much more in my life now than in the past. Yeah. So it's important, I think, to realize we're shifting towards that.
We are, yeah. If I now notice that I'm feeling like something is a waste of time, my next thought is there's something for me here, There's, whether it's sitting with impatience or, being open to discovering something in the moment, I think is pretty huge.
I think, like deeming something a waste of time is not a pleasant feeling. Like it never comes with pleasant, joyful, sparkly feelings.
Yeah.
So I think what I've noticed is I don't enjoy adding that into my life. There's already enough of that that's outside of my control. Like, I think, when I notice my mind starting to deem something as a waste of time, I think I try to get curious about what can be in it for me in this experience, so that it doesn't feel like a waste of time.
Yeah. And sometimes, I don't know how to say this other than say sometimes things are a waste of time, and then you get to choose what you do with that time, right? You could do Kegels. You could do body-based self-connection practices, accrue moments of present moment awareness, and let that be the activity. It's an opportunity for you to be with yourself.
Found time, someone once told me, and I like that. It's found time. And I do actually do that a lot, is when I have some found time, I will actually practice these things. I practice looking for colors or rectangles. I practice just being with an object that I see for a full breath. And all of a sudden, it's very useful and helpful and, life-giving way of using my time.
Yeah, I love that. Such a big shift with such a small mental shift, Okay, Gigi Bedaman, what would you like to do for a closing practice?
I'd like to whistle. I think when I was a kid, whistling was like, I don't know if it was like superstitious, it's like bad or something. Also, I didn't think I could do it very well, so like felt like I didn't want to look silly or sound silly. I still don't think I can whistle very well, but I think it's fun.
Try to whistle at me angrily.
That's it doesn't work. I'm noticing a theme to these like ending body practices. They just crack us up. But I like this. Try to do certain things angrily. It's sort of hard sometimes. What about, okay, give me another prompt. Let's play a game.
Whistle sadly.
I think that maybe it's just because my whistling skills are lacking.
Okay, whistle poorly and sadly. Oh, that was good.
You know what I like about this? It has a lot of commonality with a lot of our other body practices, although it's different. It gives you just enough that you have to focus on, that you can't be ruminating about other stuff.
Yeah.
You can't be consumed in your mind about other things when you're trying to whistle poorly and sadly at the same time.
That's right. Wonderful use of brain. Could you now whistle for me in a Jamaican accent?
I don't even know what that means. I know that you could do it, but I don't even know what that means. My brain is like short-circuiting, like smoke is going to come out of my brain if I try to think about that too much.
It's the great rewiring of the mind.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I'm already grooving. You took it on. I can see it in you somehow.
I can whistle like, I don't know. like a kid who's just learning how to whistle and is delighted by any sound that comes out.
Whee! That was like an excited whistle.
I think this is another episode worthy, but like doing things from that childhood wonder and delight place and like that celebratory feeling of like that tiniest sound that can come out. You know, I think we dismiss all of that now if it's not perfect or great, right? But imagine being a kid and you were trying to whistle and like just you got any sound out
and you were winning. Well,
that was
this
amazing.
is very specifically a game from Sports Day. When I was a kid in elementary school, we'd have Sports Day and there would be all these different games you'd play. And one of them was you have to run from, X to Z. And then when you get there, you have to eat a cracker with peanut butter on it. And the first person to be able to whistle wins. And any sound would win. And that was so much fun.
We did not play that version. I loved Sports Day.
Yeah.
I have good memories of Sports Day.
Fun.
I think because I craved silliness and play. And it was like, how do you hop in a potato sack perfectly or the best, right? Like it's like almost like that measure doesn't exist anymore, right? That ran my life of like, this is what success looks like.
The perfectionist potato sack racer. I love it. That's amazing. We should write a children's book about that.
Okay.
All right. We've closed. We've whistled. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Plans, you know. Okay, we're good.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here. And please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.